Before we jump in, a note on our content. This is created for adult audiences only. We advise listener discretion. We have discussions about sexual violence against women. We use bad swear words. We talk openly about women's autonomy. And you might just hear some opinions that don't jive with your own.
Going through ostracization, going through marginalization is not fun. Like having to bear the brunt of society and society's narrow thinking is not fun. And you have to do it because this is the only time they want you. You are time and again told that you are disposable, and this is the only time they want you.
Hello. This is Her Gajo Won't Smudge. I'm Shauna. Join me as I talk to Desi women who are imagining a better, fairer world, free of all those unwritten social rules that tell us just how to be a good Desi woman. What makes an activist? It's easy to call a street protester an activist because we associate carrying posters and marching with activism. But am I an activist for hosting this podcast? Are you an activist for listening? Today, I get to speak to Priyanka Paul. She is an illustrator, graphic designer, poet, and storyteller. And I'd say in everything she creates, her activism comes through. Priyanka embodies so many intersectional identities. In her own words, she's a queer, dark-skinned woman who gets body shamed. She's a Christian from an oppressed caste who gets trolled for reimagining the goddess Kali. And no matter how much the haters come for her, Priyanka stands her ground, using her anger to create art and to create space for all of us who don't fit a beauty standard or who don't fall in line with what society says is capital A acceptable. She is also a TED Talk speaker, and she's been featured in magazines and in the Gucci Chime for Change documentary, #WeAreIrregular. Plus, spoiler alert, she can quote Dumbledore and Audre Lorde. Your Instagram page, Art Whoring, it's like an explosion of psychedelic colors and imagery. You share your artwork and your personal struggles there. Why is it important for you to do that?
I started drawing and doing like Instagram when I was 17. I'm now 24. So that's been a while. And, I started getting on the internet and it still to this day extends the wave of like feminism being expressed via young feminists on social media and, via art. And I started doing it around like the same age where the gaze was almost all very Western in a way. And there were no narratives very much centered or like specific to me. And I think I started making art around that time. And I think my art at that time was also about making like these bold, in your face, statements. And I kind of grew out of it. The older you get, the more nuanced your work gets, the more you understand. And I think my work has evolved in that sense. There was this whole wave of like, fuck the patriarchy. Now, we can scream fuck the patriarchy as much as we want, but if we're not saying how do you fuck the patriarchy, where are we going with that? I started making all of this work and I like kept growing with it. And you're constantly told like this is selling right now, right? There's so much of like Western, or as I would like to call it, Savarna feminism that gets highlighted and is showcased as like a global feminism that like completely discards, caste marginalized or like, minority women, working class women in a country like India especially. And I feel like I wanted to talk about those things that were relevant to me but weren't being portrayed on like a grander level, on a mainstream level. And I feel like over the years, I've just gotten more honest with myself and who I am. And not who I want to be, in the leagues of who I want to be. Because my problems are not like bourgeoisie women problems. It's to a certain extent. And I feel like that is never showcased. Like even today, the conversation about feminism is like, I want to shave my legs and that's my choice. And I'm like, I don't have the time for this. This is a useless debate I do not have the time for if you're not talking about where, like that history of hair, how that is attached to like marginalized bodies. Where does that sense of like cleanliness or hygiene, and how that's like a hierarchical idea I don't want to aspire to. Like there's so much commodification, and like all of this has been turned into, even everything about me, I'm constantly told I'm bold, I'm this, I'm a brand, right? Like, oh, fierce, this. And I was like, I'm very much a whole, complete human being with all like different facets to me. And I feel like with my art, I'm just like trying to be honest with myself.
You're a queer woman in India, and I wonder what that's like for you. When you decided to come out, did you have people in your life who supported that decision?
I feel like I have like liberal parents to the point where like they're very okay with the idea of homosexuality and queerness. They're just neglectful parents. They don't care about my life. So I know that a lot of people come in talking to Indian queer people with the idea that, oh, do you have a struggle? Were you beaten up? Did someone call you a homo at home and beat you up for it? And like, luckily I did not. That didn't happen to me because, yeah, my parents just have other things to care about. They just don't care about what it is I'm doing. They just don't give a shit. I think most of my struggle is like the rest of society looks at you like a freak, and I'm constantly, being undermined or being tokenized or being stereotyped in so many ways that is now just like considered acceptable. There's a whole wave of awareness, and now we've come into very comfortable like commodification. I literally yesterday got like a brand campaign of sorts. They were like, we're looking for a queer individual and this is the treatment we want. And it's like a video where a queer person is like saying that's the sob story, And I'm like, now they don't even try to be sensitive with this. They're like, we want you to be sad. Can you come be sad for us? We'll pay you money for that. And like, it's so dehumanizing if you think about it.
Because this is your life experience.
Going through ostracization, going through marginalization is not fun. Like having to bear the brunt of society and society's narrow thinking is not fun. And you have to do it because this is the only time they want you. You are time and again told that you are disposable and this is the only time they want you. When people tell me I'm a queer artist, I'm like, bitch, I'm one of the best artists in this country right now. Don't you fucking put that queer as demeaning.
It categorizes you. It's like when I hear about, this is the best female director. I think, well, why do we need to call her a female director? She's the best director at this time.
Totally, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about a collage that you did that you posted on your Instagram page, which really has stayed with me. And it's this collage, which is like it's a street scene, and you are naked in that street scene, but you're sitting very elegantly. And it reminded me of a woman from like a Manet painting. But like all around you, there's dirt and there are pigs. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, what is that about?
Image?
Yeah.
So the part of me that you see in the collage is me. And that's from a photo shoot I did for Paper magazine for an article that was published when 377 was removed from India. Like homosexual sex was decriminalized. Being gay was no longer a crime in India. So around that time, this went up on Paper magazine. And I think I look fucking like gorgeous and glorious in that photo shoot. And I'm also easily a very hated person in India and in terms of the right wing. So they very often take my pictures, edit them, morph them, do like things that, make you feel like, oh, how disgusting. And a very common thing that they do is juxtapose my image with that of pigs, because a pig is supposed to invoke disgust and like that sort of feeling. So they do that a lot. And for me, like, I am like, you can't do that shit to me. There is nothing you can say to me that will make me feel bad. So I posted up those pictures. I was like, wow, look at this art. Y'all make free content for me. Thanks, dude. I didn't even have to put any effort into that. But it's like, that is how they view me as a person who comes from previously untouchable caste, who is a minority Christian in this country, who's queer. I'm short, I'm dark-skinned, I'm fat. All of those things, really, I am supposed to be in their minds, in their Brahminical mindsets. I am supposed to be an object of disgust. And that I do not concede to being that really fucks with them. And I will continue to, stay in my glory because I know who I am. So this is essentially reclaiming myself is that no matter what shit you throw on me, this is just reflective of the shit you are throwing.
Can you explain a little bit about your background and how what you refer to as the caste struggle affects you?
So both my parents are Bahujans. Bahujans are people who come from low caste backgrounds. My mother comes from a legacy where my great grandfather brought Neo-Buddhism to Kerala. My dad's also Christian. So, that's a different struggle. I have like so many marginalizations at this point. I kind of lose track sometimes. So growing up, like I had this staunch feminist mother, and the way she spoke about things, the way she viewed the world and how she raised me up to like speak against anything that didn't seem right. I think that goes through, like, that's what I carry on with my art and like the work I do. But I think like my background is like just definitely not, the typical Hindu Savarna background that most people of privilege kind of come from in this country, and there's like a very single narrative that exists. And all successful people seem to kind of come from that. And I don't have that background.
For people who don't know, you mentioned the word untouchable. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. There is this horrible, horrible thing that they love to hide called the caste system. And based on this caste system is a system of purity. So it discriminates people on the basis of labor. And then attaches, these values of some being greater. It's obviously a hierarchy. Yeah, those at the top have everything and those at the bottom have nothing and are ostracized, have been denied for centuries, access to simple things like water, education. To this day, major atrocities are committed against them. And the ruling class, which would be the upper caste people, are great at hiding it up. So that's why this is a very, like today now, this is a global conversation that is reaching, new places. And we're, finally having these conversations, but it's taken a long time to get there.
Do you think that this is changing in India? Do you think that now homosexuality is being discussed more openly? Do you think some of these marginal topics that you're discussing with me here are making their way into kind of common everyday conversation, or are they still treated as sort of things that are hidden and shameful?
I think definitely in terms of queer issues and just general knowledge about growing up queer, there is just so much more awareness right now. This is reaching schools in different ways, the media we consume. It's all happening. Like it could happen much more. I'm not saying it's not happening, but I'm also really wary of the nature and how it's happening, because so much of it is just like marketing. So I'm just like, is this coming from a genuine place? Is this coming from a place of wanting education? Or is this coming from a place of like where you want to profit upon it? And that is just like the problem with everything in capitalism. You kind of have to like choose your battles, If you want to further this, you kind of have to get with the system to a certain extent while attacking the system at the same time, because the aim is to break down the system. But you can't move further ahead with what you want to do unless you kind of side with the system a little bit. So it's a constant like game that you're constantly having to do and play.
You're an illustrator, a poet, and that you have a brand, an Instagram username, which is Art Whoring. And you'd like to add to that you're an angry person because most of what you do is to be angry. So I wanted to ask you about your anger and where it comes from. Why do you respond to things that you are experiencing as somebody who embodies a lot of these marginalized issues? You could respond to them by cowering, right? But you seem to respond to them by getting angry. So why do you think you respond in that way?
I think it's because people like me are not allowed to be angry. They're constantly told to not be angry. Anger is mocked and made fun of constantly, and it's almost always safer to not say anything. And in my entire life, I've just looked at people be like, why are you not saying this? And I just can't do that. Me, like saying my shit constantly gets me into a lot of trouble often. But I really don't know how to do it the other way. Like I seriously sometimes wish I could, but I don't. And I think over the years, my anger has mellowed. So I hold my anger with like a lot of it's precious to me. Because what anger means is that you want better for yourself. Your anger is a part of you that knows that you were wronged. like I don't have the time to view anger as like a negative reaction, because I really value it, because it really has a capability and to take you places, to do something with it, because when you're angry with things, it's a catalyst to change. And also for me, my anger is not like my personal anger. My anger comes with like my anger for like the people that I represent, my friends, the people I surround myself with, the people who I see struggling every day. And that anger comes from a need and a want to make the world a better place. No matter how wishful that is or how naive it seems. Like, I feel like that anger will go away. I feel like a lot of anger is just grief. Anger is grief. And I think sometimes that grief will really mellow you down and you will feel very helpless at one point of time. And I feel like I'm getting to that point. So I'm going to make as much use of my anger as I can. Because a lot of people in this world who are not angry or can't be angry. So if you can, you should.
And it feels like your anger translates into activism, which I think is really remarkable, because for a lot of people, anger translates into a lack of control and then a kind of explosion, and then that dies down, right? But in your case, it seems to go into something else and create something new with it. I wanted to ask you about why your Instagram account is called Art Whoring.
So this is again like a 16-year-old thought up this name. Okay. So, I mean, I love that 16-year-old. They were really smart in coming up with funky names like that. But yeah, art whoring just sounded really cool to me. And also, like, the back idea behind it is that people are really scared of saying the word whore. There have been brands who have been like, can you change your username? Because it's kind of like, we don't know how to like work with you with that username. And I'm like, I'm not changing that username. But people are really scared of the word whore. And I am kind of sort of a big Harry Potter fan. And there's this line that I think Dumbledore says where he's like, fear of a name increases fear of a thing itself. And I use whore because any woman who is sexually liberated or, you know, does her own thing is called a whore. And my whole idea was, be scared of me. Yes, I'm going to use that word and I'm going to keep saying it. Because ever since I was like 13 years old, I've been called that word and no one has ever said sorry for that. You know, just like we call 13-year-old young girls words like that because we're so like, we just want them to feel insecure about themselves, their bodies, their identities, who they're growing up to be in this world. So I'm like, I'm going to use this word. I like this word. It's a cool word. So art whoring is just like, yeah, fucking art up or something. I don't know, yeah.
So you talked about how girls are treated from a young age. When do you think that you felt like you were a feminist? What was your aha moment?
I grew up with a feminist mother, a woman who said she was a feminist when I was growing up. So for me, I feel like as soon as I could just like understand what it meant, I was a feminist. And I feel like I don't think you can say you were born a feminist. I feel like I was born a feminist. But kind of very early on, let's say like 5th grade, I was like, yeah.
You did a series called the Goddess series, which I think is based on a poem.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I did the Goddess series and it's based on a poem by poet Harneet Kaur. And the poem talks about if these goddesses from different cultures were modern day women, how they would like behave on social media and how would their lives be. And, you know, it's a very cool poem and it's about like, you know, these goddesses like walking into a temple and just like breaking it open types. And it just really at that age, like it really like touched me and I was like, wow, I love this poem. And I love like the imagery of like goddesses as modern day women. So I drew it. And that's one of my like first pieces that went viral. And that's kind of where my artistic journey kind of started. Yeah, I also got a lot of flack for that because I did draw like the goddess Kali as a modern day woman and people in India do not seem to like that. It's completely stupid. It makes no sense because the drawings of goddess Kali or any god in India right now are paintings made by Raja Ravi Verma. And they protested against him when he made those paintings as well. So the anger would have made sense if it came from a place of disrespect, but it didn't. You know, it came from like an imagining of a goddess to me, because a goddess to me does not look like, you know, some decades ago someone painted. It's not giving as much for me, like that depiction. So I did my own version. And I feel like myths and fairy tales, should be allowed to be reinterpreted as you like. But like the conversations on like the hateful comment sections were about what religion I belong to. My name is pretty ambiguous when like in India. Priyanka Paul doesn't really tell you what religion I am. And I'm like I come from like a mixed background, which in India is so surprising because intercaste marriages and interreligious marriages are less than 3% in India.
It feels like with a lot of things, like as soon as, whether it is that, you are reinterpreting the spirit of Kali, the goddess, but you're reinterpreting her for the modern day, keeping that spirit intact, that can be offensive to people because you are messing with their traditional view, right? But it's the same way, I think, in which maybe the big pressures we come up against as feminists is that if a woman is stepping out of bounds, is showing herself in a bikini confidently, without having to have that Bollywood body, that is also something which is going to get people pissed off because they don't want to see a woman who is completely her full individual self.
It's like there's constant punishment for any deviation from the status quo. Like even the slightest, like it makes no sense. I'm like, sit down. Do you think I'm making any sense? You're sending a woman rape threats for drawing a woman who you want to conserve. You're not making any sense. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, Priyanka, you put out a zine called BedX. I think it was really groundbreaking because it's a sex ed zine for men and it's been created by you, a woman. Why did you want to do this?
So BedX is really old now, but it was a really like exciting and interesting project. And the whole idea was at this point of time, today there are so many like sex ed influencers in the Indian space. It's really great and, so great to have so much like sex ed content in general. But I think I made this like 3-4 years ago. And it was during a time where I feel like there was no like sex ed conversations happening, and people keep saying this. People keep saying there's no sex ed. There's like no sex ed in schools, especially in like Indian schools, no sex ed at all. And, in general media, we're consuming also not a lot of sex ed. So I was just like, okay, maybe I'll just make a sex ed guide. So me and a friend, Rushil Bhatnagar, we worked on this zine together, which was sex ed directed towards men and penis owners. And it talked about just sex ed in general through a very Bollywood type gaze. And Bollywood being Bollywood is so full of like these horrible, masculine stereotypes and like the worst stereotypes for like gay men and stuff like that. And we took all of that and I feel like we subverted it and made this zine. So I think that was really cool about it. This was like friendly, accessible, communicating off the page. Like you felt like you were talking to a friend giving you sex advice. And I think that was like the intention, yeah.
And why did you want to make a book about male sexuality?
Because I'm tired of men being mediocre at sex. Also, like, really, sometimes you, like, talk to the men in your life or just, like, men in general, and you're just like, how do you all not know this? How do you just not know this? How do I know this? Why do I know this and you don't know this? And as a feminist, you're constantly, like, burdened with changing the world. It's like, why are other men not writing sex ed for other men? Honestly, like even now, the majority of like sex ed influencers and educators on the internet are women telling men how to wash their dicks. Men don't know how to wash their own dick. Again, still asking these questions, but no one's answering me as to why other men are not doing this. So I was like, okay, I'll take one for the team. So yeah.
Do you think there's a relationship between better sex ed and more interaction with women and a reduction in gender violence?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think like key to it. I feel like once you start viewing women as like actual human beings, you're automatically not going to be violent towards them and assault them. Like I talk about a lot of my own experience with sexual assault. I was assaulted as a child in school and, by also a student. And I feel like so much of that could be mitigated, not happened, if we just had honest conversations, or like just sex ed, because like even that situation was not dealt with well. The school, the teachers just didn't have enough, like I want to say infrastructure, but just not even like the basic humanity to deal with something like that well, you know. So I definitely think there is like an inherent connection between those things.
You've said that you consume a lot of online content. What you are seeing online, do you think that there are more and more women posting content that challenges societal norms?
I'm definitely seeing that, but again, it's being all governed by the algorithm. And, you know, social media is designed in such a way that it again replicates the hierarchies that already exist in the world. Now, social media is not a tool for reform or a tool for change. Social media is a tool for marketing. And there's only so much you can do with the master's tools. You know, the master's tools will not bring down the master's house, as Audre Lorde said. So, again, this is creating so many more barriers to these different women and feminists who are trying to use social media. Like, I work with a lot of like feminist groups to understand, you know, dealing with hate speech on social media, and, you know, the rise of like real right-wing narratives on this, on social media. Like you can see a real like turn to fascism on the internet. So yeah, I feel like social media is not the tool we glorify it to be on its own, that it is still us. And we need to keep finding loopholes and be like ingenious and really smart to, you know, like organize and like protest on social media. But this is still like, you know, space that has been previously not been accessible, that space that you now have access to, that I feel like we should make the most use of. Yeah.
When you post content is that there's so many women, and I think some men as well, who say, you know, thank you for posting that, or you're a queen, or, you know, they have something positive to say. And I think there are also people who feel that what you're doing resonates with them. So there seems to be like some conversation that you're starting. And in that way, I wondered, from what you're seeing in social media, do you think that it's giving women outlets so they don't feel that they're alone in their struggles?
Definitely, definitely. I feel like, so I use social media to talk about a lot of like very personal things. I've been very vulnerable on the internet, which I sometimes regret, but for mostly I'm really like happy I was vulnerable, because that vulnerability is valued in so many ways on the internet and gives you the opportunity to like share. You know, I talked one time about having a parent who has a chronic illness and having to be their caretaker. You know, this is such a specific thing which I feel like you might not find a lot of posts talking about. But there were so many comments on that talking about like, you know, people who, like me, have had to take care of their parents from a young age. You know, there was just like this moment that, hey, someone else sees you. So I really value that. But the whole thing about social media is because, you know, especially in a country like India, is reaching a very certain few privileged kind of people. It's not reaching everyone. So I'm constantly in this dilemma where I'm like, what I'm doing doesn't matter. Like, who gives a shit? Like, what is it going to do? But I feel like it's selfish to also think that. So I have decided that what I truly believe is that I don't want to believe that what I'm doing is not doing anything at all. But I also don't believe that what I'm doing is changing the entire world. You start small, do change around people around you, the communities you exist in, and your friends and your families. And you start small. And I feel more people need to be convinced that that is like important as well. And that you don't have to be constantly doing some grand things which get a million likes for it to be real. Yeah.
I want to read something that you wrote in 2016.
Okay.
You said, at 15, I cut my hair into a mohawk and faced ridicule at my house and school. My parents refused to look at me, and kids at school jeered at me. If you try to change the dynamics of everyday life, or try to change society or gender roles, even through something as menial as a hairstyle, you're gonna get punished. This is something that I really value about what you're doing, because you clearly know that if you're gonna get your hair cut and it's going to be a mohawk, that someone's going to get pissed off with you, right? You know that. But you do it anyway. And I think in pushing those boundaries and in cutting across those many intersectional struggles that you embody, you really are making a change, right? With every post. And so I want to thank you for that, Priyanka.
Thank you. You're so kind. Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
When you ask me, with the hair and the bikinis and stuff like this, there is a certain idea even attached to what we consider acceptable feminism. And it's, adhering to a lot of notions of respectability. Like, the UN does a bunch of feminist conferences once in a while. I promise you, I will never be invited to one of those because I don't fit their ideas of polished feminism. And I feel like the more you adhere to these notions of the status quo, the more you make it difficult for the other people who want to not be part of that. So I feel like I need to constantly be like, no, fuck you. No, fuck this and fuck that. And no, I'm not doing, I'm not going to be what you want me to be. And you need to learn to be uncomfortable and okay with that. Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's really, truly one of the big things about feminism, that women should be allowed to have choices and be their full, complete selves. Mm-hmm. It's not about becoming a feminist so that you fit a particular mold of what a feminist should be.
Yeah.
It's about having choice and equal voice. And my friends and I love the posts you've done of you in bikinis. One of my girlfriends sent me a screenshot of a picture of you and your friend in a bikini. And underneath it, she wrote 2023 summer goal to be, to feel confident in your bikini, right? To not care.
I mean, I look hella hot.
You look gorgeous.
I look hella hot. Mm-hmm.
Love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Priyanka said, I'm going to make as much use of my anger as I can because there are a lot of people in this world who are not angry or can't be angry. So if you can, you should. Such good advice. I'll take it. Channel your anger, speak out, hold your ground, write, post content. This is also everyday activism. Join the club. Thank you for listening to Her Kanjo Won't Smudge. I'm your host, Shauna. If you want to get in touch with us and rage or have a good cry or just tell us what you're thinking, look for our webpage online or find us on social media. Until next week.